So in this demonstration, we're going to talk about painting with color in Photoshop. Now to select a color in Photoshop, there's many different ways of doing this. I can select the foreground color, and from here that brings up the color picker, and I can just select a color I like from here and click OK. I'll hit B for brush and zoom into the area. Now I want to work non-destructively, so I'm going to create a new layer, and this will be the skin layer. And then I can go ahead and just start painting. Now because I'm using a tablet, I'm going to go ahead and turn on pressure control in my tool options here, and that will allow me to change the size of the brush tip based on how much pressure that I'm applying. So if I apply a little bit of pressure, you can see the tip is very small. If I apply a lot of pressure, it becomes larger. And I'm going to just paint in this area with the skin tone I've selected. Okay, once I'm done with that, I can come back in here, bring the outlines back. If I want the black pixels to come back through, I can change this to a multiply mode. And then we can come back in here using our eraser tool and just take out some of these areas. So another way of selecting a color in Photoshop is by way of the color panel. And we can load in a color by clicking on the color we want. And then by using these sliders, we can fine tune that color. So let's say I like this particular hue of blue, but I want it to be a little bit brighter. I can raise the brightness. I can also change the color model that's used by the color panel sliders. I can select RGB sliders, CMYK sliders, whatever you're comfortable with. So now let's go ahead and paint in her hair. We're going to find a nice blonde color, but before we do that, let's go ahead and add in an additional layer. We'll title this one Hair, and then I can come back in here and paint with this color. And then I'll come back in here and change the mode again to multiply. So as we're painting, we can change the paintbrush size using the bracket keys, but another handy keystroke is Control Option Drag. And what this allows you to do is change the size and the hardness of the brush all in one keystroke. If I drag up and down, it changes the hardness. If I drag left and right, it changes the size of the brush. So if I want this brush to be harder, I can hold down Option Control and drag down. Okay, very handy keystroke. So another way we can paint in Photoshop is by using a palette of custom colors that we create using swatches. So let's go ahead and open up the swatch panel, and let's go ahead and select some colors for her dress here. So we'll click on the color picker, we'll select this blue. Now to add this as a swatch, you want to click on Add to Swatches. Go ahead and name the swatch. And when I click OK, you'll notice that it adds the swatch to this area. Let's go ahead and add another color, maybe a lighter blue. We'll click Add to Swatches again, and we'll add another color. As you can see, I've added 3 color swatches here. As you start to add more color swatches, it can become a little bit disorganized. So what I like to do is create a group, and I'll name this one Dress. And then I can drag and drop these color swatches into this group. Before we start painting the dress, let's come back in here into our layers, and we'll create a new layer for the dress. Now whenever I have a painting tool selected, if I hold down Option, it turns into the eyedropper tool. And we know with the eyedropper tool we can sample different colors, but you'll notice as I do this, it's also adding to this area of the swatches panel. So these swatches are the most recent areas I've sampled. You can see as I keep sampling these areas, it's adding more swatches. Okay, so let's go ahead and paint the dress, but this time instead of using the brush tool, we're going to use the paint bucket tool. That's G for paint bucket tool. So I have my paint bucket tool selected, and if I come back here to my swatches, it turns into an eyedropper tool. When I click, it loads that color in, and I can go ahead and fill in with this color. Now because most of these areas are enclosed, I am able to use the paint bucket tool, and it constrains the painting to just that area. Another important thing to note here is that in my tool options for the paint bucket tool, I have all layers selected. If I didn't have all layers selected, it would be painting the entire layer. Alright, so now let's finish painting in the rest of the skin. To do that, we'll come back here and we'll create a new layer. We'll call this one Body. And before I forget here, I'm going to go ahead and change the color of the dress. I'm going to use the same color that I used for the top here. Now let's switch back to our swatches. Now because I have a painting tool selected, if I hold down Option and click, it will load that color into my foreground color. So if I come back here into swatches, I can also create a swatch here. I'll call this one skin tone. Click OK, and it's added it to the swatches. I'm going to create another group for just skin tones. Click OK. And then I can drag the new swatch I created into the skin tones group. And so if I come back here into my paint tool, I already have this skin tone selected. I can just add this color back in. Okay, so now let's paint the wings. So for the wings, I've already picked out some colors. I've created a swatch group and I've saved it to my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and import swatches, and it's a .aco file. I'll select wings, click open, and it loads in these swatches. We'll come back into our layers and we'll create one more layer. This one will be the wings layer. We'll go back to our swatches. So from here, we can use the paint bucket tool again to paint these colors in. Okay, so there's one last area to paint in here, this wing. Now watch what happens when I use the paint bucket tool with this. Now because this area isn't closed in, it allows the paint to escape and it paints the background too. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll come back in here into our layers. So now to close up these gaps, I'm gonna come back in with my paintbrush tool. I'm gonna select a small hard brush, maybe 4 pixels will do. And I'm just gonna go ahead and paint back in to close up these gaps. Okay, so that's it. I've established a good starting point for my painting. I've added in some base colors, and from here I can do some more advanced painting to add in lighting and shadow. I can add in shading and more layers to give it some additional dimension.